Sanje Jadan Zanji Janan Janan Madu Dani Jabzum Jidagi Juzu Yibe Zonan Jitola Benju Sani Jabasho. Sanje Jadan Zanji Janan Janan Madu Dani Jabzum Jidagi Juzu Yibe Zonan Lola Benju Zonan Jabasho. Sanje Jadan Zanji Janan Janan Madu Dani Jabzum Dagi Juzu Yibe Zonan Lola Benju Zonan Jabasho. Zanin Namji Dewa Dan Dewe Judan Namno Juju Dogon The Dharma expanse Palakasava is the essence of all Buddhas, of the 3 times who shows me directly in my mind as Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious root Guru. Please bless me and all sentient beings that our minds become the Dharma. Please bless us that the Dharma become the path. Please bless us that the path dispel confusion. Please bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. And so now the first thing is we have to check our motivations whenever we begin a Dharma session, or really anything we do, if we can remember at the beginning to check our motivations and make sure that we have the motivation of bodhicitta, then whatever we do will end up being good and beneficial. If we forget to check our motivations and just begin with a neutral motivation, or we get distracted or whatever, then no matter how virtuous it might seem like the action we are doing should be, it will not actually become virtuous. So we have to check our motivations at the beginning. So for that reason, please first think to yourself that you are listening to the Dharma not only for your own sake, but for the sake of all sentient beings who all experience suffering. We can see the suffering around us now in the midst of this current pandemic. There's the suffering that's always present, even when there's not a pandemic going on. Even when there's pleasure, the pleasure is temporary and ends, and when it ends, there is more suffering. And so no matter what, there's suffering is inescapable in our lives unless we practice the Dharma. And it's not just our own lives, it's also the lives of all other sentient beings. So please think to yourself that we must do whatever we can to bring all sentient beings to a state that is utterly free of suffering, the state of completely perfect Buddhahood. And in this way, please listen with this motivation of bodhicitta. The Dharma that we are discussing now, we are going through the Dharma talks of Gampopa, the string of pearls. It's a collection of Dharma talks that was collected by Gomtsul, one of Gampopa's nephews, who was also a great meditator and a student of Gampopa's. So at the beginning of the Wesak, month of Wesak, we began with a few talks, and I gave 2 talks. And at that time, I thought, well, the good thing about this collection of a string of pearls is that it's a set of 20 different talks, but they're all kind of complete teachings in their own. So even if I only teach a few of them, then everyone gets a complete teaching no matter what. But after I'd explained in 2 talks, I went through 4. In 2 of my own talks, I went through 4 of Gampopa's, and people asked me to please continue teaching. And to finish the set. So I guess I have to do it. So once you've started something, it's always good to bring it to a conclusion. So I will, over the next several days or whatever, I will go through and finish going through this collection, A String of Pearls by Gampopa. And the way I have been doing this is I've been reading from the text. And first I read through each talk. And then I go through and talk about the things that make me think of or reminds me of from other teachings I've had or thoughts that I have that I'd like to share, or viewpoints that need explaining, and so forth. So I'd like to continue with the talks, and so now we're at the 5th talk. And the talk reads, "As for the Dharma, I would like to teach you all." And this is Gampopa speaking. So we can think to ourselves as you listen, these are the words of Gampopa, who is like the source of all of our Kaju Dharma. One of our 3 forefathers. It all came from Gampopa. So as you listen, he's saying, I. That doesn't mean me, it means Gampopa. I'm just reading his words. "As for the Dharma, I would like to teach you all. If at this time we cut the ties to this life and never lack genuine faith as we practice, any Dharma will be profound. At the end of the DHARMA practice, there is a quote of the Buddha. Do not do any misdeeds. Practice abundant virtue. Completely tame your own mind. This is the teaching of the Buddhas. In addition to not doing any misdeeds, practice abundant virtue and then tame your own mind. If you tame your own mind, that is exactly what we call the teaching of the Buddhas. Practicing even this, just this one dharma is sufficient. From the wisdom at the hour of death, all things are impermanent, so meditate on the conception of having no attachment to anything whatsoever. Realizing mind is wisdom, so meditate on the conception of not seeking Buddhahood anywhere else. As this explains, all things are impermanent. The internal mind changes and is thus impermanent. There is nothing impermanent about any external appearing object, about people who are older or younger, about friends, companions, spouses, jewels, or things. Thus, you must grasp that nothing is true in practice. Your own body is on loan from the four elements, so it is impermanent. It is not hard to recall alone. Thus, since all things are impermanent, do not be attached to anything. Realizing mind as wisdom means realization of the mind essence. This means that knowing that self and other, appearance and emptiness, ultimate and relative, the expanse and wisdom are all inseparable. If you look for that nature anywhere else, you will not find it. You know it by looking at your own mind yourself. Realizing it is called Buddhahood. As it is said, from seeing the unseen, the path of seeing, this is what is called the joyous. As that is the case, when you realize your own mind essence as it is called Buddhahood. This is because it is seeing the unseen, your own mind, which you had never before seen. That itself comes from realizing your own mind, so that is the meaning of not seeking the Buddha elsewhere. Likewise, if you cast all your wishes for this life behind you and practice, no matter which gateway to the Dharma you enter, you will accomplish your aims. It is important to give up all efforts for this life in practice. If you teach Dharma and act on wishes for this life, you will become what we call a worldly person telling Dharma tales. So it is important to practice without mixing in this life. There is no Dharma but that. So that's the talk that Gampopa gave. And to go back to the beginning of it and explain it a little bit, sometimes the words seem pretty clear, but sometimes it takes us a while to hear them. Anyways, to go and explain, at the beginning the talk starts, as do most of the other talks in this collection. As for the Dharma, I would like to teach you all. So this is Gampopa speaking to his students, and he's saying at the beginning, here's what I want to tell you. And what does he want to say? If at this time we cut the ties to this life and never lack genuine faith which we practice, any Dharma will be profound. So here the question is, what makes Dharma profound? What do we mean by profound? So normally, when you hear Dharma teachings, people will say, oh, Kala Chakra, it's the highest of all the tantras. It's the non-dual tantra of the unexcelled tantra. It's the highest of all tantras. It must be profound. People will say Mahamudra is profound, Dzogchen is profound, the middle way is profound. And then they might think, well, practicing Chenrezig is not profound. Practicing Medicine Buddha is not profound. They might think that even just engaging in practicing the 10 virtues and giving up the 10 non-virtues, they might think that that's not profound. But actually, what really makes Dharma profound is how you look at it. And when we talk about profound, what profound means, as Trungpa Rinpoche has said on many occasions, profound means helpful. So no matter how profound Kala Chakra might be, if it's not helpful for you, it's not profound for you. If meditating on impermanence, which seems like it's a simple thing until you've tried it, even that, if you have the right attitude, that can be very profound. And for some of us, or for all of us at some point, that is the most profound Dharma because it's the most profound, because it's what we need and what is most helpful for us at that particular time. And so for that reason, when we think about what makes a Dharma profound or not profound, it's not the Dharma that makes it profound, it's us. The Gyawan Karmapa also talks like this. He talks about this. He tells a story, he gives all right, that's right. This is a story about Lama Mokchokpa, who's a great Kaiju Lama. Mokchopa said, if Vajrayogini is red, she's red. If Chakrasamvara is blue, he's blue. It doesn't matter. If I just practice the nature of my mind, that is what I need. So it doesn't matter really so much what you're doing. If you're meditating on some deity like Vajrayogini who's red and has all these ornaments and such, or Kala Chakra who has 24 arms or whatever, that's not what is important. Just because something is difficult to understand doesn't make it profound. Instead, what is important is our motivation. So even if you're practicing Vajravarahi or Kala Chakra, if your attitude is not the right attitude, it's not going to be profound. So when you go, and we might go to a Dharma center and we hear about some Lama coming, giving this empowerment, giving the Kala Chakra empowerment. And everyone says, oh, it's profound. Let's all go take this empowerment. But if you go and take the empowerment and your motivation is not a motivation, a profound motivation, it's not going to be profound Dharma for you. So what makes a profound motivation? It's what Gampopa says here. It's cutting the ties to this life and never lacking genuine faith in the Dharma. So if you say, I'm not doing this lifetime, I mean, of course, we're in this lifetime. We have to live this life. We have little choice but living this lifetime. But we have to remember that the things like seem like they're important in this lifetime are only temporary. They won't last for long. And if we are attached to them, then they're going to hold us back. So we need to cut the ties, not be attached to our businesses, friends, family, and so forth, and instead think about what's really important. That what's really important is practicing the Dharma. And then if we have genuine faith, then that means that any Dharma we practice is going to be be profound. And the example that Gampopa gives is of the teaching at the end of the water torma practice. And this is actually a very famous teaching of the Buddhas. It says, do not do any misdeeds, practice abundant virtue, completely tame your own mind. This is the teaching of the Buddhas. This is the teaching of the Shakyamuni Buddha. It was the teaching of Mahakashyapa Buddha. It was the teachings of Dibankara and Krakachmundi and all of the other previous Buddhas. This is what the teaching of the Buddhas, what the teaching that all the Buddhas have given. We have to give up practicing, committing any misdeeds. We have to practice as much virtue, as good virtue as we are able, and we have to completely tame our own minds. And if we do that, that is the teaching of the Buddhas. So if you cut the ties to this life, you give up the misdeeds such as killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, divisive speech, insulting speech, and idle chatter and malice and covetousness and wrong views. If we give up those wrong actions, then practice good actions, refraining from killing, refraining from stealing, being generous, saving beings' lives, and so forth, then that is a profound teaching if we go into it with that attitude, because doing that will tame our own mind. And so if you are taming your own mind, that is the teaching of the Buddhas. So here, Gampopa gives a quote from a sutra called "The Wisdom of the Hour of Death." And this is a very short sutra, and it's actually been translated into English, and you can download it online. If you look on the 84000.co website, you'll find a translation of it online. And it's a very short and interesting sutra that I recommend that you all look up and read. It'll only take you 5 minutes because it's only one page. All things are impermanent. There's a quote from it here. It says, all things are impermanent, so meditate on the conception of having no attachment to anything whatsoever. So as the sutra says, everything's impermanent. So how do we know that everything's impermanent? Well, we look at all the sorts of things. Well, we've got the internal mind. It's changing. It's always changing. It's moving about. It's thinking about different things. You see different things. You think about different things. The mind is always changing. You're happy one moment, sad the next. That's changing. Therefore, it's impermanent. There's nothing impermanent about any external appearing object. These flowers on the table now look nice. Tomorrow they'll be wilted. There's nothing impermanent about people. There's nothing permanent about people who are older and younger. Younger people, you can watch. If you look at children, you can see the change in children immediately. They just over the course of a year, look how they change. With older people, you can see people who are once were hale and hearty who get old and decrepit. Your friends, companions, spouses, jewels, or things. It's like they're all changing all the time. Everything's impermanent. Thus, you must grasp that nothing is true, nothing is real, nothing is lasting, and practice. Because none of these things are really lasting on their own, they can't really give us lasting happiness. When you meet people and you see them, you might enjoy their company for a while, but if you spend too long with them, then you've just spent too long with them, and it's just no longer enjoyable. It's time you have to go back, and even if you're enjoying your time with them, the time is changing. No matter how well you get along with someone, at some point you're going to all pass, all leave each other. It's like when we're in this lifetime. An example that Gyaltsen Rinpoche used. It's like when you go on an airplane flight. You arrive at the airport, you go through check-in, you see a bunch of people you've never seen before, and you get to the gate where you're waiting for the flight, and there are 100, 200, 300 people who are waiting to get on the flight. Most of them you've never met before, probably almost all of them, except for the people you're traveling with. You all get on the airplane together. You have this brief time that you're together in the airplane, and then after the flight is gone, everyone goes off. They all collect their baggage, and that's the last time you'll probably ever see these people in this lifetime. So we come together for a short time and we go. And so our lives are just the same way. We come together with people for a short time, and then we leave them. They leave, we leave. They die before we do, or we die first. In any way, in any respect, at some point we're going to all part. It's just the nature of life. So realizing that they can't bring us true, lasting happiness, then we have to devote ourselves to what will bring us true, lasting happiness, which is practicing the Dharma. Oh, excuse me, I somehow lost my place in my text. It's the problem. Paper wouldn't do that. Technology does. Skips. And so when we practice, what we have to do is really the essence of all practice means that we have to tame our minds. And in order to tame our minds, we have to realize what mind is. As it says from the sutra, realizing mind is wisdom. So meditate on the conception of not seeking Buddhahood anywhere else. Usually we think that we need to find Buddha, that we have to do something, we have to change something, make ourselves different, find out something different. And you might hear instructions saying that you just need to recognize your own natural face in the Dzogchen tradition, or just recognize ordinary mind, but we still think that it's going to be changing ourselves into something different, that we're kind of defective samsaric beings right now, that we have to change ourselves into something else, or we have to kind of go someplace. When we're going to practice, say we're practicing medicine Buddha, there's a pandemic going on, so it's good to practice medicine Buddha. You're practicing medicine Buddha, you're visualizing yourself as medicine Buddha, and you're visualizing the medicine Buddha in front of yourself, both at the same time. And it's you're sort of thinking like, I have to become the medicine Buddha. I have to become something other than what I am. But really, when we're practicing, all we have to do is tame our mind, relax our mind, let ourselves be able to look inward, to be able to see what we actually are. We don't have to look anywhere else. We don't have to try to become someone else. We just have to look inside and see, what are we really? What is our mind really like? We don't need to make it into something better. We don't need to try to get rid of bad things. We just need to see what they are. So realizing mind, as Gampopa said, means the realization of mind essence. This means knowing that self, another, appearance, and emptiness, ultimate, relative, the expanse, and wisdom are all inseparable. So right now, we think that there's me and there are others. We think that they're all the things that appear, and then there's somehow this ultimate emptiness. We think that all of these are different, but actually it's all the same. It's all the same thing in essence. There's the ultimate nature. We have to recognize that nature. And what's the best way to recognize it? It's by looking at our own mind. We spend our whole lives looking outside, looking to become something else. And instead of doing that, all we really need is to just look and see what we really are. If you look for that nature anywhere else, you will not find it, as Gampopa says. You know it by looking at your own mind itself. Excuse me, something happened here. That was Problematic. Oh, yeah, here we go. Maybe I shouldn't use technology. Maybe I should just print these. Oh, there we are. As Gampopa says, when you realize your own mind essence as it is, that is called Buddhahood. This is because it is seeing the unseen, your own mind, which you had never seen before. The reason we haven't seen our mind before is that we haven't looked. We've always been looking outside. So we have to learn how to look inside. That itself comes from realizing your own mind. So that is the meaning of not seeking the Buddha elsewhere. So what do we have to do? We have to cast all our wishes for this life behind ourselves in practice, no matter which gateway to the Dharma we enter. If we do this, Gampopa says you will accomplish all your aims. So we have to practice. If you teach Dharma and act on wishes for this life, you'll become what we call a worldly person telling Dharma tales. So it is important to practice without mixing it in this lifetime. There is no Dharma but that. This is the sentence that Gampopa ends each of his talks with. So that was the fifth talk. And so let's continue now with the sixth talk. As for the Dharma, I would like to share with you all. We individuals who practice Dharma from the depths of our being need to think of it. This life is short and there is much to know. We do not know how long this life will last. So like a swan who takes the milk from water, you must take willingly what you desire. Life is short and we haven't much time. Calculate it from the 4 great kings to Akanishta and then calculate the hells from that. In comparison, human life is short, and within that, people in Jambudvipa have the shortest lives. Even among them, nowadays everyone over 60 is living on borrowed time. Life is short, and there is much to know. There is no end of things to learn. Within the Dharma, the shortest is the water torm of Jwalamukhi. It is said that there is someone down in U who wrote down everything he could find about the family of Jwalamukhi, and it fills an entire bookshelf, it's said. So you'll never run out of things to learn. If there is that much about Jwalamukhi, the shortest, why mention any other? As there is no end of things to learn, you cannot learn everything. Thus, like a swan who extracts the milk from the water, you must take what you desire. For example, when cows cross the river Ganges in India, their milk drips into the water. Swans have a curdling agent in their bills, and when they stir the water with their bills, they can take the lumps of milk and curd from the water to eat. Likewise, we need to take what we desire. Of all the various things we could learn, we need to take the instructions we desire. The necessity for practicing the instructions is to gain control over our mind and make it workable. Those who are interested in creation and completion need their mind to be workable for creation and completion. For everything else, whether the channels, winds, and bindus, the relative and the ultimate, Mahamudra or Dzogchen, a workable mind is necessary. What is a workable mind, you ask? That is what it is called when we internalize the realization of that mind is dharmata, and then compassion arises automatically, or when we realize the equality of ourselves and others. It means having little attachment to appearances as true. Until that occurs, we need to concentrate hard and practice. If we act on autonomous clinging to truth, even the high realms will be hard, let alone Buddhahood. To quote from Hevajra, no meditation and no meditator, there is no deity or mantra either. In the nature without elaborations, the deity and mantra are truly present. There is no Dharma than that. So that was the sixth talk of Gampopa, and then to go back to its beginning. After opening it with this ordinary, usual sentence, in this one it's phrased a little bit different. He says, as for the Dharma, I would like to share with you all. We individuals who practice the Dharma from a depth of the heart need to think of it. So we have something we have to think about. And what it is he gives this quotation. This quotation is from Atisha, from his text called Entering the Two Truths. And it reads, this life is short and there is much to know. We don't know how long this life will last. So like a swan who takes the milk from water, you must take willingly what you desire. So life is short. We've only got a short amount of time on this planet. We don't know how long it's going to be. So Gampopa here, in explaining this, talks about how calculate it. He says calculate it from the four great kings. That's one of the realms of the gods, to Akanishta. That's the highest realm of the form realm, and then calculate the hells from that. So what this is saying is, when you think about the human life, so in human life, we have a lifetime in Jambudvipa. The scriptures say that it's 100 years here, right? And a year is 360, well, 365, we say, for a solar year, but for a lunar year, it's more or less 360 days, 12 months of 30 days. So, in the realm of the four great kings, a single day equals 50 human years. So, and then in the four great kings, they live 1,000 years of these. So you have the days, 50 years of human years. You have 30 of those makes a month, 12 of those makes a year, and then 1,000 years of that. So that equals 9 million human years. So, in comparison to us, the gods and the four great kings live extremely long lifetimes. And then it more or less doubles, or what it grows exponentially, basically, all the way up to the realm of Akanishta, the highest level of the form realm. Called the, if we translate Akanishta, that's the called below none in English is how you could translate it. And then the hells have even longer than that. Like one day in the four great kings is a day in the lowest of the hells. So the hells have extremely long lifetimes. So in comparison, human life is short, and within that, people in Jambudvipa have the shortest lives. And Gampopa says nowadays everyone living over 60 is living on borrowed time. So this was in the 12th century Tibet. So if you live to, and even until recently in Tibet, people would think if you've lived to 60, you've lived a really long time. Now, in most of the developed world, people are living longer lives, 70, 80, many people are getting on to 90. But even when you look at what happens to people as you get to over 70, people, you start to really slow down over 70. These 70-year-olds, I mean, you kind of notice it a little bit at 50, and 40 and 50, you can start to notice it, but it really just gets slower, and you get slowed down after 70. And after 70, you just can't do all the things you used to do. When you're 80, it's pretty hard. It's difficult. 90, very difficult. And the people who lived 100 or 110, first of all, they're very rare. And what can you do? What can you do with your life when you're in that state? So now, while we are still young enough, we have to take this time to practice. And, and we have to learn what we need to learn. We can't possibly learn everything there is to know, because you could study. I mean, you can, for all of the various topics of study, that you could get like a doctorate. You could get a doctorate in medicine. You could get a doctorate in literature. You could not just in literature. There's so many different types of literature. You can get doctorates in all sorts. And if you wanted to learn everything and get doctorates in everything, you'd spend your entire life getting doctorates and still not be able to get every doctorate that could be got. There's just no way you could get a doctorate in every field. And what good would it do you? So instead, you have to look at what is it that you need to know, and you need to pick that, and you need to learn that. And so the example is of the swans who takes milk from the water. And this is an example that I've read for, always hear about this in the Dharma, but you don't always hear the actual explanation of it. So here's the explanation. So the swans take the milks from water. What this means is, like, when the cows are crossing the river, we're talking about the Ganges. This is India, so we're talking about the Ganges River. And when the cows are crossing the river, their milk leaks from their udders. So there's little bits of milk in the river, but you just can't get it because it's, milk is liquid and water is liquid, so they kind of mix together. But the swans are able to come, and they've got some sort of a special curdling agent. I didn't know about this until I read this. So it's a really interesting fact about swans, or factoid about swans, that they have a curdling agent in their bills, so they can stick their bills in and stir it around and curdle the milk and then eat the lumps out of the water. So that's how the swans take what they want. They want the milk. They don't want the silt. They don't want whatever else is in the water. They want the milk, and so that's what they take. So just as the swans are careful not to take out all the other things that are in the river Ganges, they take out only the milk. And so the same way, we have to look at what's going on, what's really useful for us, the Dharma, and take that. If you're a swan in the river Ganges, if you've gone, those of you who've gone to India and gone to Varanasi and looked at the Ganges, It's apparently much not cleaner now during the lockdown. That's what I hear. But usually it's just filled with all sorts of stuff. And some of it you really wouldn't want to eat, but the swans can go and they can take the milk that they want. So we have to be the same. We have to take the dharma that we want out of this. And so we need the instructions. And so the instructions, the main reason we need the instructions is to make our mind workable, as Gampopa says. The main necessity for practicing the instructions is to gain control over our mind and make it workable. So if you're doing something, it's not like you might think to yourselves, oh, we need to practice medicine Buddha because we need to free ourselves from sickness. Well, if you're going to do that, you have to have a workable mind in order to be able to do the practice. If your mind is not workable, you're going to get distracted or it's just not going to work. So you have to be able to sit down. You're doing your medicine Buddha practice. You have to be able to relax and just let yourself be within the visualization so that you can actually concentrate on the practice. Be able to pay attention when you're reciting the mantra, not by forcing yourself to, but by just letting yourself doing it because your mind is workable. So whatever Dharma practice you're doing, you have to have, whether it's creation and completion, like a visualization practice or Mahamudra, or if you're working on some tantric practice with the winds and so forth, whatever you're doing, you need to have this mind that you can control. So what is it like? So when you say we need a workable mind, I mean, generally we say workable, it means that a mind that'll kind of do what you want to do. It's not like if you tell your mind, if you decide, I'm going to do shamatha practice, then you can do shamatha practice. If you tell your mind, okay, it's time to do medicine Buddha practice, you can do medicine Buddha practice. But what gets us the ability to do that? It's when we're no longer distracted by all the things around us. So Gampopa says it's like when we internalize the realization that mind is dharmatan, then compassion arises automatically. In other words, when you really see the nature of your mind and you see that it is empty and yet still luminous and clear and knowing. And then when you realize that there's compassion that arises naturally. Or he says, when you realize the equality of ourselves and others, when we realize that we and others are all the same. So this is talking about a fairly high level of realization. So we have to get there. And how do we get to that level? We start by practicing loving kindness. Then when we have loving kindness, when we have the feeling that not just ourselves, not just our mothers, not just for those people we like or for our enemies, but for all sentient beings, if we can have loving kindness for all sentient beings, then that develops into compassion. That compassion develops into bodhicitta, the wish to achieve Buddhahood. Then as we practice with that motivation of bodhicitta, then we'll be able to do whatever practice we're doing will bring us closer and closer until eventually our mind will get more and more workable until we get to the point where we really realize what the mind is. So we start with loving kindness, develop bodhicitta, do the various practices that we are taught, and then we will be able to really come to a point where mind is workable. When we want to rest in shamatha, we can rest in shamatha. When we want to do a visualization, we can do the visualization. When we want to study, we'll be able to study without being distracted. As it says in the Vajradhara lineage prayer, the essence, the essence, the main practice is non-distraction. Non-distraction is the main practice as it's taught, as ones who rest simply, not altering, just that fresh essence of thought. So no matter what happens, if you're able to just sit there and let rest, not altering whatever appears, just looking at it and knowing it, that's the essence of our practicing, developing the awareness. Normally what happens is we have a thought, and that makes us think of something else. And then we grasp at something and we think this is a good thought, bad thought. And then we follow some thoughts, we try to suppress other thoughts. And when we do that, then our mind just gets more and more. It's just be able to rest and be undistracted and watch the movie of mind as it passes by without getting too involved in it. And that's what will eventually bring us to have a workable mind, just being undistracted. So until that occurs, we need to concentrate hard and practice, Gampopa says. If we act on autonomous clinging to truth, that means if we think that really things exist, that this is how they are, and we cling to them as being real and separate and different from us, then it'll be hard for us to even attain the high realms, let alone Buddhahood, as Gampopa says. No meditation and no meditator. There is no deity and no mantra either. In the nature without elaborations, the deity and mantra are truly present. There is no Dharma but that. So now let's continue. We've got a little bit more time, so let's do one more of these talks by Gampopa. The seventh talk reads, as for the Dharma, I would like to share with you all. Individuals who have turned their mind away from this life should give up their own desires, resolve that everything they do be for the sake of sentient beings, and not let this depend upon their own self-interest. Awakening comes because of sentient beings, our lords. We should rouse loving kindness and compassion for sentient beings and practice with the hope and thought, if only all beings could be happy and free of suffering. To sum it up and examine it, we must, according to the Mahamudra tradition, practice the three freedoms from faults. Our practice must be free of the fault of appearances, free of the fault of emptiness, and free of the fault of non-arising. How do we practice that? Freedom from the fault of appearance means that we should practice without apprehending appearances as true. Practice appearances as mere dreams and practice appearances as mere dreams and illusions. Practice them as appearing but having no nature. Knowing that appearances lack truth brings the knowledge that suffering has no truth. When suffering is no longer self-standing, the Dharma has become Dharma. When you know that all appearances of self and other lack truth, that is called being free of the fault of appearance. Freedom from the fault of emptiness means being free of the desire for emptiness. When you think, it is empty and I will realize it is empty, and then want it to be empty, you have strayed. When you know that afflictions and thoughts are empty and that the objects that produce sufferings are emptiness, they will not arise. That is called being free of the fault of emptiness. Freedom from the fault of non-arising means that appearance and emptiness no longer alternate. Knowing that appearances do not arise, and that emptiness also does not arise, is called being free of the fault of non-arising. Just that is also called being free of dualistic cognition. In actuality, freedom from the fault of appearance means being free of attachment to the extreme of appearance. Freedom from the fault of emptiness means being free of attachment to the extreme of emptiness. Freedom from the fault of non-arising means being free of the attachment to the extreme of dualistic appearance. Thus, according to the scriptural tradition of Mahamudra, freedom from the fault of appearance, freedom from the fault of emptiness, and freedom from the fault of non-arising, these three freedoms from faults are the qualities, the three kayas. Because of being free from the fault of appearance, the extreme of samsara is the extreme of samsara is exhausted. It is the appearing and empty nirmanakaya. Because of being free of the fault of emptiness, you do not remain as a listener and in peace and happiness. So does the unceasing dharma sambhogakaya. Because of being free of the fault of non-arising within mind's desires, the wish for void emptiness is exhausted, the non-arising dharmakaya. To practice in that way is the great Brahman Saraha's intent. There is no dharma but that. So now to go back to the beginning of this talk. So again, Gampopa starts talking about the important thing, which is turning away from this lifetime. So a lot of this talk is talking about fairly high topics, the freedom from the three faults, freedom from fault of appearance and emptiness and non-arising. But if we're going to get to understand, if we're going to be able to understand those three faults, we have to start out from the beginning. You can't just leap to profound Dharma. You have to get there. You have to start with a Dharma that is profound for you, the Dharma that will help you. And so that means starting with the basic things of cutting the ties to this life. As it says in the Vajradhara lineage prayer, revulsion is the legs of meditation. You can't go anywhere if you don't have legs. or at least you couldn't before they invented wheelchairs. You have to have someone else carrying you. If you want to go somewhere on your own power, you have to have revulsion for samsara. This doesn't mean that you necessarily have to leave everything behind right away and go off and meditate in a cave. What it means is that you have to spend some time thinking about how the things of samsara, no matter how pleasurable they seem now, in the end will deceive you. In the end, they will let you down. No matter how wealthy you are now, you cannot take a cent of that with you when you go on to the next lifetime. No matter how good your friends are now, no matter how good your family is now, not only will they not accompany you into the next lifetime, they may well turn on you in this lifetime. There's so many stories. I'm sure you know people who used to be great friends who then became total enemies. You know people who got together and married. They're great. They're totally in love with each other. And then something happens and they hate each other and they get divorced and they won't speak to each other. It's because we look for happiness outside of ourselves in some other people and other things, but we cannot find it there because it is all ultimately deceptive. The only thing that's not deceptive is the Dharma, looking and seeing seeing what your own mind is. So you should give up your own desires and resolve that everything you do be for the sake of sentient beings and not let it depend upon your own self-interest. So think to yourself, if you think to yourself, I'm going to do this for the benefit of all sentient beings, but I'm going to get something out of it myself. And if I do medicine Buddha practice, then I'm going to be healthy in this lifetime. I do Zambala practice, I'm going to be wealthy. I'm going to do all this. And then that's not independent of your own self-interest. That's you're thinking about me. Now, if you're doing medicine Buddha with the thought, I need to benefit all sentient beings. And if I'm going to benefit all sentient beings, now while I have this precious human body, I need to be healthy. So I do medicine Buddha practice. Then if you're not thinking about it, I just want to be healthy, but instead thinking, I want to use my health for the benefit of the others, that's not dependent upon your own self-interest. And if you're thinking about Zambala practice, and if you're thinking, I just want to be rich, I want to be prosperous, well, of course, there's nothing necessarily wrong with being rich and prosperous, but that's your own self-interest. So if you really want to do it with bodhicitta, in order to benefit other sentient beings, if you can't even feed yourself, it's really difficult to get to a point where you'll be able to help other sentient beings. So we need to have something. So that's why we do practices such as Zambala and medicine Buddha and so forth. But we have to make sure that our motivation is right. I want to be rich. Not such a pure motivation. I want to be able to have resources to benefit other sentient beings, then that's a good motivation. When you think about Shambhala practice, what is Shambhala? Shambhala is the perfection of generosity embodied in the form of the deity. So if you're going to practice, if you're going to embody, if you're going to be rich, what do you need to be rich? You need to practice generosity. That's what wealth comes from. The cause is being generous. If you are generous in spirit, then things will come back to you. If you are freely willing to give, then things will come back to you. That's just the nature of how things go. So, but you have to do that independent of your own self-interest, thinking to yourself that it's for the benefit of others. And so we have to think about it for the benefit of others, because it is only because of others that we will be able to achieve Buddhahood. And so really, to be able to do this, there are three things that we need to practice in the Mahamudra tradition. And these are the three things we have to be aware of. There are three faults that we have to be free of. One is the fault of appearances. Second is the fault of emptiness. And the third is the fault of non-arising. So the fault of appearances, what that means is when we cling to the appearances of this life as being real and true, thinking thinking that that we can get real happiness from other things, that real people, that there are real friends, that they're lasting and true and really what we need. Instead, we have to realize that all the appearances of this lifetime arise and then they go. Sometimes good appearances arise, and then they go. When good appearances arise, we enjoy them, but don't get attached because they're going to go. When bad appearances arise, remember they're not real. They will go themselves because all appearances change. Some may last longer than others, but they will all eventually change. Practice them as being mere dreams and illusions. So remember that all phenomena, everything that appears, everything that becomes and exists, all of it is like a dream and illusion, and that it's not something solid there. It just happens because of causes and conditions, like a dream that you have at night. When you wake up from a dream, whatever you dreamt of is gone. In the same way, the appearances that happen today are gone when we come tomorrow. So knowing that appearances lack truth brings the knowledge that suffering has no truth. So when you're no longer attached to things as being real, then things that are painful don't affect you in the same way. You realize that they're not real, and because you're not attached, then it's uh, not as painful. It doesn't necessarily mean that sensations of pain go away right away. It means that they lessen and decrease, and they no longer affect you because you're no longer attached to them. When suffering is no longer self standing, when you no longer think that it's a real independent thing, then the Dharma has become the Dharma. That means that you're really practicing the Dharma. Like I say at the beginning of each of my talks, I say, please bless me and all sentient beings that our minds become the Dharma. This means may the Dharma that we practice really be real Dharma, as opposed to just some sort of show that we're doing, but instead that it be real Dharma practice. That's what it's talking about. When you know that all appearances of self and other lack truth, that is called being free of the fault of appearance. So that's the first fault, the fault of appearance. And then the fault of emptiness, that means that you think, oh, all appearances are not true. But instead of really realizing what the nature of appearances are, you read some Dharma text and you hear, everything is emptiness. And so then you have this idea, everything is empty. Something happens and you have this idea, everything is empty. And you're kind of attached to your idea, everything is empty. Because you're attached to this idea of everything being empty, you aren't actually seeing the emptiness. You're caught up in that idea. So you're not really getting emptiness. You've got this conceptual idea. This is now, on the one hand, a conceptual idea of emptiness is not necessarily a problem, but you must not be attached to them. The conceptual ideas of emptiness are not really realization of emptiness. Uh, so, so if you just have the thought that thing out there is empty and I'm going to realize it's empty, that's the fault of emptiness. I'm going to make it emptiness. Instead, the way we need to approach it is we need to say, all of these things that appear and exist, it says in the text that they're empty. Okay, so what does that mean? I need to look and see what they really are. Are they really emptiness? You can't really just trust it. Okay, Trungpa Rinpoche says always, we have to recognize that all phenomena are emptiness. All the other lamas say all phenomena are emptiness. But that doesn't mean that we can just take it on blind faith. We instead have to look and see, what does emptiness actually mean? We have to do that, as discussed in the talk we discussed earlier, by looking at our own mind, making our own mind workable, and then looking at that mind. And so then when we see what the nature of the mind is, if the nature of the mind is empty, excellent, fine. If we look at the nature of the mind and it turns out it's not empty, excellent, as long as we're really realizing what it is. In other words, we don't want what is going to help us is not some idea. Just having an idea. Everything is emptiness. I'm fine because now I've read this Dharma texts, I've read the middle way philosophy, and I know everything is empty. That's not going to save you from birth, aging, sickness, and death. It's not going to stop you from suffering as you die. The only thing that's going to stop you from suffering as you die is if you realize the nature of your mind, and that means starting now, developing your loving kindness, your compassion, bodhicitta, taming your mind, gaining some stability, making your mind workable, and then looking to see what is it really like. That's what we need to do now. That's the second fault, the fault of emptiness. And then the third fault is the fault of non-arising. So the fault of non-arising basically means that it's kind of a funny term, because usually we think that there's appearances. So we've meditated, okay, we've realized that appearances are not true. And then we realize we can't just conceptually make things emptiness. But sometimes we're still left with this idea that appearances and emptiness are separate. When you're looking at appearances, you're not seeing emptiness. And when you're looking at emptiness, you're not seeing appearance. That's the way it looks to us. We kind of think of emptiness and appearances as separate. But being free of the fault of non arising means realizing that those appearances themselves are empty. And at the same time as they're empty, they also appear. Like the Rinpoche's example that Rinpoche always does. So it's the example of the hand. You have the example. We look at the hand. Where is the hand? We'd say, this is a hand, right? I can wave it. I can wiggle my fingers. I can pick up things with a hand. I can do things with a hand. Therefore, there must be the hand. So where is the hand? Is this the hand? It's the thumb. Is this the hand? It's the index finger. Is this the hand? No, that's not the hand either. This is the pinky or little finger, depending on which dialect of English you speak. None of these are the hand. They're all fingers. Well, is this the hand? That's the palm. Is that the hand? It's the back of the hand. It's the skin and the flesh. Where is the hand? It's like all of those put together, but if you say what actually is the hand, it's just like an idea. So there's that. That means the hand is empty. When you can break all these down into cells and molecules and atoms and subatomic particles and whatever, break it down to the smallest part, and you're not going to find anything real that's a hand. Instead, we put them all, they all sort of come together because of causes and conditions, and we look at it and we give it the name hand. So the hand is appearing. It's there and we can do things. That's the appearance. But at the same time, the hand is empty. There's nothing there that we can really say is the hand. This is not the hand. That's not the hand. None of these are the hand. None of the parts of the hand. There's no hand separate from the parts. So there's the hand there's the emptiness. That emptiness, if you look for the emptiness of the hand, is the emptiness of my right hand over here with my left hand someplace? No. The emptiness of the right hand is right here on the right hand. It's not separate from the appearance of the hand. They're the same. That's an important point. And then when we look at the nature of our mind, as Rinpoche often says when he speaks about Mahamudra, you look at the nature of the mind and you can't find it. That means that it's empty. And yet at the same time, you still know. Just because you can't find your mind doesn't mean that you stop knowing. You don't turn into a rock. You don't go into blank nothingness. Instead, you still know. Though you know, you can't find your mind. So that's the union of the emptiness with the clarity of the mind, the union of clarity and emptiness we speak about. It's the same with everything. So that's the fault of non-arising. These are three faults. They're kind of difficult to understand at first. And then the hard part, the really difficult part, is after you get a conceptual understanding, going beyond that conceptual understanding so that you actually really know them for real. That's the part where you just have to put in the time practicing. So like I've been saying, what we have to do is we first have to give up our attachment to this lifetime. Then we need to develop loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta, tame our minds gradually until it becomes truly workable, and then look at the nature of our mind to see for ourselves what it really is. And we have to do this under the guidance of someone like Trungpa Rinpoche or the other great masters who are around, so that we can really be certain that we aren't falling into that fault of emptiness where we have a conceptual idea and think that we've realized the nature of the mind when really we only have a conceptual nature. So we have to do what we can to humble ourselves and to follow the guidance of experienced masters. And so that is what this talk is speaking about. If we do that, to practice in that way is the great Brahman Saraha's attent, as GAMPOPA says at the end of this talk. There is no Dharma but that. So that is enough for our session today. I would like to thank you all for listening. Now, as we conclude, it's important for us to dedicate the merit of what we have done by teaching and listening to the Dharma. So please think to yourself that we need to take the good that we have done by listening to the Dharma and teaching the Dharma, and take that as representative of all the good that we have ever done in this lifetime, or will do in future lifetimes, or in past lifetimes, and that all sentient beings have ever done or will ever do. And we take this, let us please dedicate it so that all sentient beings who are suffering from illness because of this pandemic may be freed, that all those sentient beings who are suffering because of deprivation, because of this pandemic or any other cause of deprivation, be freed from deprivation and enjoy prosperity. May we dedicate it so that all sentient beings uh, who are experiencing any type of suffering be freed from that, so that all those beings who are working hard to relieve others of suffering, whether temporary or ultimately, may have renewed courage and hope and continue in their efforts to help other sentient beings. And let's dedicate it so that all these sentient beings eventually will become Buddhas. And in this way, please recite the dedication of merit. 오선암 대담제세바니 돕는 예배라남 밤새네 개가나진 바랍존바이 Sibet soledro. Thank you.